You bout to make me show out. Kill him and I'ma show out. A straight nigga like a perm and let it blow out. Tuck it in a whole lot. Rushing in a full lot. The master of the plan, you know you fucking with blowfly. Red Bull, give your bitch wings and let the whole fly. Overdose lyrics while listening, you can croak out. My bitch ass, hips, and titties, they need to poke out. Rims need to be bow-legged. That they don't know about. I'm so hot. Stamina, arsenal, I'm Portugal. June like, oh man, let me go, man. I gotta go ahead.
Dewan Montrell Hart, aka Young Dro, born January 15th, 1979. When you talk about an artist being signed to another artist and successfully playing that next in line role, there weren't many that were better suited than Young Dro. The reason may be because Dro really had rap talent and the personality that goes with being an entertainer. In those areas, he was naturally gifted. In others, he struggled, and those took over what was supposed to be a much more fulfilling rap career. Young Dro in the mid-2000s was one of the biggest street rappers period in hip-hop and had a huge top 10 record to prove it. Shoulder Lean was an infectious single, nursery rhyme-ish on the hooks, and classic Young Dro flow that shot up the talk show and Billboard charts, peaking at number 10 on the top 200 and number 1 in rap and R&B. That record alone sold over 2 million copies and propelled his Best Thing Smokin' album to peak top 3 on the charts, signifying Young Dro had the chance to do something special, even if it was for only a moment. And then what happened? Well, Young Dro wouldn't release another album for the next 7 years as he dealt with label issues, strained relationships with T.I. and other Grand Hustle members, but most importantly, an addiction he normalized as his weekly routine, where for days at a time he'd be running, as he calls it, meaning he'd attempt to stay high as long as he could, taking and mixing drug after drug in order to remain on a level he began to recognize as normal. Needless to say how that may have played a role in his career and the opportunities he missed because of it, not to mention the financial strain it must have placed on him in the end, because as you know, addictions are expensive. Cheap addictions are the fastest way to die. Nevertheless, Dro carried on this way for almost a decade, where he was still releasing mixtapes and still showed he had a special talent, but it wasn't being displayed to the masses on a level expected from an artist that had so much potential at one point. It helped T.I. was the hottest rapper in the game at the time, and Dro was in an era money in music was at its all-time high, behind ringtones becoming another avenue to distribute product to consumers. And within the next few years, streaming would hit, placing any artist that could develop a catalog over that time in a great position to succeed financially if nothing else. With his rap skill alone, I have no doubt Young Dro would have blown up as an artist, as his fan base was one of the surprisingly strongest out there, which is a huge reason he graced the cover of XXL for their first annual freshman list, and a huge reason this feature is being done today. It seems a lot of people still want to know what really happened to Young Dro. Let's talk about it. Salute to Kyron Green for this request. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth Music. Let's get it, man. Take a minute to like, subscribe, and comment on who I should do next. Young Dro is a rapper and songwriter from Bankhead, Atlanta, Georgia that was always attracted to music and sound, but more in the streets at an early age until he noticed one of his best friends, Chris Daddy Mac Smith, begin to gain notoriety and eventually blow up as one half of the duo Criss Cross. Seeing that, Dro decided to take rap a bit more serious, especially after he was shot in the stomach and back at just 15 years old. T.I. recalls everyone in the neighborhood always talking about Dro being the best rapper in the area, so he always wanted to sign Dro, even before Tip himself had a deal. Young Dro would sign, but not to T.I. just yet, instead to local label Tight for Life, ran by bass music rapper Raheem the Dream. After an album, he then signed on with rapper Rocco, who wasn't experienced enough to keep a buzzing talent like Young Dro, and finally he landed with Tip after a radio station call in which T.I. was on promoting his own project. the two linked and the rest was history. Stunt number 1, drug addiction. Out the gate, we have to start with this because it's probably the biggest and could very well be the root of all the issues with Young Dro that caused him to miss a very short window in rap where his natural style and personality fit right in and could have been highly successful. The mid-2000s was an interesting time in hip-hop where crunk was taking over, so was snap music, and making songs to dance or at least to step to. This was egged on by cell phones just starting to allow MP3s to be downloaded to them, and before you knew it, everyone had their own personalized ringtone and downloads shot through the roof. Young Dro had one of the more popular ringtones in Shoulder Lean, as he had the voice and catchy delivery to be hot back when the South was on top as well. The almost immediate success after he got with T.I. meant lots of money coming in, and since 15 years old, after being shot and having to be on painkillers at the hospital, Dro says they opened his eyes to drugs and made him crave it even after he left healthy enough to return home. It doesn't help that he also remembers his father struggling with drug addiction for 50 years and having 5 brothers that died from overdosing on some form of drugs. Either way, he began his own routine where he'd buy all his drugs on a Monday, get high until Wednesday, then do some more, and that's what he meant when he said he'd be running for a few days, and that's how his weeks were. He recalls spending over $3,000 a week on his addiction, and sometimes more if ever there was company around. The constant drug binges would have him too relaxed, leading to him putting off or not being available for a lot of situations that could have helped his career. Stunt number 2, nothing after Shoulder Lean. Not just the hit Shoulder Lean, but also Dro's debut studio album was a great catapult to future success, and many expected he'd release no later than a year from then. But like most drugs, they aren't made for consumption at all, but especially the way Dro did his. He said he'd mix Molly with lean, then before he'd go to sleep he'd pop a Xanax, wake up and do it all again. He later explained how he feels his addiction may have been hereditary and found him from watching his father and soon brothers hooked on them for years. The addiction placed Dro in too much of a relaxed state where he couldn't even think about doing music. Like mentioned, for 7 years nothing came after Best Thing Smokin' except mixtapes that weren't serious music he'd submit for the album. He literally disappeared from the rap game on a mainstream level, and much of that was because he was getting too high and unproductive. He says the high became more important to him than making music. Right then and there is where he lost his place as far as a rapper that had the chance to make something great of himself. T.I. was doing great and had a huge platform, so encouraged his artists to stay in the studio and create and develop your sound, and of course make more hits. But no more hits came from Young Dro, and more over time, he didn't just fall off the charts, he became less and less remembered or introduced to new fans as those 7 years went by. He'd release High Times in 2013, led by the single FDB that was actually catchy and showed Dro could make hits, peaking at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 singles. But the album only sold 6,000 copies first week, signifying as well Dro's hiatus hurt more than he thought. Stunt number 3, time passed and era changed. Like many 2000s artists, time and a different era just caught up with them after a while. Remember that short window we spoke about? Well, by the end of the decade and beginning of a new one, snap music was dead and crunk music became turnt music. Then that turned into a boom of SoundCloud rappers and virally famous one-hit wonders, making an artist like Dro seem old and past his prime. By then, if it wasn't Drake, Kendrick, anything Young Money, Chief Keef, Sean Kingston, Soulja Boy, even the swag rappers, can't forget that time capsule. If it wasn't something in that lane, it wasn't and didn't have a chance. By the mid-2010s, Dro's music popularity had reached its end. If you weren't a fan by then, you wouldn't become one, as the game went more melodic into murder music and drill rap of today. Dro fit nowhere in that spectrum. He released a few more albums independently, but none brought that spark back that he had in the 2000s. All in all, Young Dro was a cool rapper who had the fan base and talent to do something special, but he was addicted to drugs, and that caused him to miss his era and not fit into a new one. He says he's clean now and helping his own daughter to get clean herself. Guess he was right about addiction being hereditary in his family. He was right on the cusp of being a huge rap star, but for these reasons, his growth was stunted. Salute, much respect. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth Music, and I'm out.